Sutra 1 in Chapter 2 of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So what is Kriya Yoga? It's described here. Kriya Yoga is intensive self-discipline, studious self-inquiry, and surrender to God. These are the practices of Kriya Yoga. In Sutra 2, Kriya Yoga is practiced to weaken and eliminate all obstacles to self and God realization. All right, so here we have it. The Yoga Sutras, the things that we're going to be studying in this chapter, the whole point is to weaken and eliminate all obstacles to knowing what you are and to experiencing this divinity within and around you. Now, intensive self-discipline. We talked yesterday about aligning your life in such a way that you don't have to think so much about things. You make your list. You know that tomorrow you're going to do these 5 things. You're going to get them done. You don't have to think about them. You don't have to debate them. So by intensive self-discipline, it starts with deciding what do you want to experience. And then you do your best to figure out what do I need to do to experience that. If you want to be more clear, you decide that every morning you're going to meditate. If you want to be healthier, every morning you're going to do your Hatha Yoga practice. And you do it every day without fail. Studious self-inquiry. There's a couple layers to this. First of all, we need to figure out the difference between what we think we are and what we actually are. So paragraph 3, down here below Sutra 1, Roy writes, surrender of the illusional sense of self-identity to God is accomplished by nurturing devotion to the ideal of being self and God realized that culminates in transcendence of ego consciousness. Attention and awareness are then unified with supreme consciousness. So whenever we meditate, remember, I encourage you to feel the body, to pay attention to the body, to see the thoughts. We have to remember that anything that we can see, like experience, that's not us, because we can experience it. We cannot see ourselves. Just like the eyeball, unless there's a mirror out there, the eye cannot see itself. Okay? So the thoughts, you see them, you experience them. They're not you. The emotions that you have, you're used to identifying with them and getting caught up in them, and they get you in trouble or not. But again, those are not you, because you do have the capacity to pull back and just witness them passing through you, right? I mean, have you been able to be like angry or a little sad or happy and just pull back and say, well, that's interesting. It's something that you can do. When you dream, again, even though it's internal, but you're still witnessing it, so it's still not you. When you experience that point where nothing is happening, you are not identified with anything, but you are still fully present, that is you. Okay. Remember the story I told you yesterday about Phil, who when he woke up, he was aware of just being awareness, presence, and then slowly he became aware of his thoughts, and then slowly he became aware of his vocation and his relationships, and he put on this ego suit. So the difference is that awareness is the real him. The things that he put on, these are the false sense of self. So it's learning to delineate between those two. All right. Studious self-inquiry, this happens all the time. You need to always be aware of the difference between the illusional sense of self and the real sense of self. And surrender to God are the practices of Kriya Yoga. Okay. Now surrender to God. This is usually the hardest part for people because we are used to being identified and attached to the results of our actions. We do things because we want this to happen. And it makes us feel good. We get a sense of pride and accomplishment when that happens. This is a totally different way of being. Lahiri Mahasaya, Sri Yukteswar, in their commentary on the Gita, and when they talk about Kriya Yoga, basically in the Bhagavad Gita there's a saying that says the yogi is entitled to action only, not to the fruits of the yogi's actions. And to practice Kriya Yoga, when you meditate, on one hand, when you first get started, you need to have a reason why. Life might not be so easy for you, or you've got some emotions you need to overcome, or you've got some emotional difficulties. You practice, you get on the spiritual path because of that. That's the beginning. But just like when we talked about the difference between the gunas, tamas, rajas, and sattva, when a person's in a tamasic state, they need to be motivated to get up and meditate. They have to have a reason, otherwise they're not going to do it. But then again, that gets them in a rajasic state, where now they're always having a reason. I'm doing this because I want to be enlightened. I'm doing this because I want to be a better person. I'm doing this because, and so on. It goes on and on and on. But once you are already meditating, and once you are already doing the things which are supportive of you, then you need to let go of attachment to those results. Because it's not always going to work out that you're going to get the result. Okay? Sometimes you're going to sit to meditate for 20 minutes to a half an hour, and you're still going to be thinking the whole time. Sometimes you're going to sit there for 2 minutes, and all of a sudden, bam, you just experience a blissful state. There's not going to be... You're going to get better and better at it. But if you're invested in the results of your practice, you're also setting up a pattern to being let down. So whatever you're doing, surrendering your actions, surrendering the fruits of your choices to God releases you from that karma. You're doing your best, but it's not up to you anymore. And to be honest, it was really never up to you, but you think it is, and that's why you experience suffering. Intensive self-discipline, studious self-inquiry, and surrender to God, these are the practices of Kriya Yoga. And Roy writes down at the bottom of this page on 30, he says, I am frequently contacted by individuals who express their interest in learning Kriya Yoga practices. They usually want to learn meditation techniques, and they seldom know the complete practice of Kriya Yoga includes all of the practices described in this chapter. Practice of meditation without the support of all of the recommended practices is not complete and cannot produce soul-satisfying results. If you really want to get the full expression of your yoga practice, which I highly recommend that you do, because again, everything in your life will become better because of it, practice all of the 8 limbs that we're going to be going over today. Everything becomes easier. James Lin, which was one of Yogananda's most advanced spiritual disciples, I believe he met Yogananda when he was in his 40s, when James Lin was in his 40s. But by this time, James Lin was already a successful businessman. And one of the things that Yogananda said, because he made such progress, in about 5 years he had experienced this samadhi state and was able to maintain it. He said the reason he was so successful in his spiritual practice was because he was so successful in the other areas of his life as well. And so what I have found too in working with a lot of people is that if you are successful in, say, business or a particular endeavor, and you're really good at one thing, that will apply to your spiritual practice as well. If you know people who are always just floating around from one thing to the next and never accomplishing anything, and they're just here and there and nothing ever happens for them, they will be attracted to the spiritual path because they'll think, oh, well, I don't need to be attached to anything, but they'll never really make very much progress because they don't have that discipline, that ability to say, this is what I want, I'm going after it. So you see, if you've been successful in other areas of your life, this will help you be successful here. If you are successful here, this will also help you be successful in other areas of your life. Now, overall, why do we practice this stuff? Because we are infinite. We live forever. We've had countless incarnations. Before you were born, you were somewhere else. You were born, you're here now. When you're done, you're still going to be somewhere. And I remember one time Mr. Davis said to me, we were sitting at the plant where they have all their books and we were just eating lunch. And he said, well, you have to be somewhere in infinity, so you might as well make the best of it. You have to be somewhere in infinity, so you might as well make the best of it. And once you figure this stuff out, then you're awake. Then you're clear. Then no matter where you are, whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter, because you are there. You know what you are. And this is different than, say, someone who is unconscious and who is just going from one experience to the other, one experience from the other. They're born, they die, they suffer, they have some happiness, they're born, they die, and so on. What kind of life is that? That's not much one. That's not much of a life. This whole point is to wake you up, to have you grow to your full spiritual potential, so that when you're in this world, you're really in this world. And when you're not in this world, well, you're there then. So success here equates to success there. Consciousness is a continuation. Wherever you are now, that's where you're going to be when you die if you've not made any changes. So we're trying to get you to a point to where you are awake, you are clear, and you are always awake and clear and can live from that perspective. Then you're free. And once you're free, great, live your life. That's why we do this. So Sutra 2, Kriya Yoga is practice to weaken and eliminate all obstacles to self and God realization. Basically, you practice what is in this chapter, and what happens is, you deep down inside, you are already clear, you are already awake. You just have a lot of stuff covering that up. It's like there's a lot of mud on there. And what we're trying to do is just get rid of that mud. we're not trying to make you anything. We're just removing the things which are blocking that direct perception of what you are. If you're trying to get water to flow from one place to another, you can't really, you could push the water, but that's not going to have the best effect. What's easiest is if you just dig a trench. You dig a trench, the water just goes naturally. Same thing. By practicing these things, by not being forceful or violent about it, you just naturally wake up. The practices within here will just naturally eliminate the obstacles to knowing what you are and to waking up to your natural state. Because just like you go through life and you go from birth to being a toddler, to an adolescent, to an adult, spiritual growth happens that same way. If you just let the right circumstances be there, the growth happens naturally. Sutra 3. Some restrictions which can cause suffering and interfere with endeavors to be self and God realized are egoism, illusions, attachments, aversions, and confusion about birth and death. And Roy writes, the primary cause of human suffering and misfortune is inaccurate or incomplete perception of our essence of being and our relationship with God and the universe. When the body is healthy, there may be psychological suffering. Fear of change, misfortune, or death can cause mental and emotional distress. Even when all material circumstances are ideal, their eventual ending is certain, because nothing in the mundane realm is permanent. Confronting the facts of life should not cause us to be pessimistic or fearful. We should be highly motivated to improve our understanding and learn how to wisely relate to them. Relate to the facts of life, that's what he's referring to. Okay, in these next sutras, we get into a further description of these restrictions that we can experience. So 4 reads, inability to accurately perceive what is true is the primary cause of other restrictions, which may be dormant, weak, controlled, or freely influential. Inability to accurately perceive what is true is the primary cause of other restrictions, which may be dormant, weak, controlled, or freely influential. Think about someone who thinks that, once they achieve making a certain amount of money, or a certain status, or a certain position, then they have made it. Okay, they have decided that once I have made my first million, or whatever it might be, or once I am the head of this company, then things will be great. So they're defining their sense of self and their happiness through this external means. So then they get it. Okay, now I've got it. Then what happens? Yes. Then there's something else. Well, if only I had a more beautiful wife. Then things would be great. And then they leave their first wife and they get what they think is a more beautiful wife. And this woman just nags him to death and takes all his money. Now he's got all his money. He's got a beautiful wife. Now what? Now if only I had a private island somewhere where I could get away from this beautiful wife and all the stresses of work. And it just goes on and on and on. Or the opposite could be, they could experience that position, and then what happens is it's taken away from them. They get fired, or there's downsizing. And where are they now? Back to where they were before. So this whole idea that you have to accurately perceive what is important in life. And this is broad, far-ranging. This isn't just, with things like money and power. It also goes to like family and friends. If you try to define yourself through a family member, even if it's a child, or if you try to define yourself through a spouse, there's no guarantee that that's going to always be there. The kid, he may not like you. He may leave, right? And then what happens? Your sense of self is crushed. The spouse may not work out in such a way. So what we're trying to get at here is that whatever you are investing your attention in, it's okay to enjoy it, but it's not okay to identify with it. That's where the problem comes in.